Franklin State Penitentiary is more than an abandoned prison. It's a gateway to fear itself. The walls don't just stand, they whisper secrets. Shadows don't just follow, they trap. In this collection of 5 chilling tales, you'll hear the story of a guard lured by ghostly voices into an inescapable cell, a contractor who finds an unmarked room hiding a terrible warning, and a journalist whose search for the truth uncovers a warden's horrifying legacy. Follow prisoners lost in a tunnel that distorts reality, and a delivery driver whose last stop becomes a nightmare they can never leave. Each story will drag you deeper into the horrors of Franklin, a place where the living and the dead are never truly free. Enter if you dare, but remember, not everyone makes it out. Story 1. The Whispering Cell. I didn't believe the rumors about the prison until I saw Cell 16 for myself. When I started working as a night guard at Franklin State Penitentiary, the old-timers had plenty of stories to share about the South Wing. Haunted, they said. That place isn't empty, no matter what they tell you. I laughed it off, of course. I figured it was just the usual ghost stories meant to scare the new guy. But one stormy night, I was assigned to patrol that very wing. The rest of the team acted casual about it, but I could tell they were holding back smirks. The South Wing was cold, colder than the rest of the prison. The air was heavy, like it was pressing down on me, and every step I took echoed a little too loudly. Most of the cells were empty shells, filled with rusted bars and crumbling walls. Then I saw it. Cell 16. The door was slightly open. That didn't make sense. I'd been told the whole wing was sealed up tight, no exceptions. As I shined my flashlight inside, I heard it. A whisper. It wasn't clear at first, just a faint sound like wind slipping through cracks. Then I realized it was a voice, low and raspy, and it was calling my name. Michael! I froze. My radio crackled, but there was no one on the other end. The voice came again from inside the cell. Michael, help me! I'm not going to lie. I almost turned and ran. But curiosity got the better of me. I stepped closer, shining my light into the cell. It was empty. Nothing but a rotting mattress and some broken furniture. Hello? I called out, my voice shaky. The whisper turned into a soft moan. It sounded wrong, like someone in pain, struggling to speak. I stepped inside the cell, trying to convince myself this was just a prank. That's when I saw the journal. It was wedged between 2 loose bricks in the wall, its leather cover faded and cracked. I pulled it out and flipped it open. The handwriting inside was frantic, the letters jagged like they'd been scratched in a hurry. The first entry read, "They've forgotten me. Days blend together. The pain never stops." I felt a chill run down my spine. Flipping through the pages, I found more disturbing entries. The writer described horrible things, being locked away without trial, tortured and ignored. They mentioned hearing whispers at night and seeing faces in the walls. The whispers around me grew louder. One page caught my eye. The words were scrawled in huge, uneven letters. "The cell is alive. It sees me. It waits." I looked up, and for a second, I thought I saw something move in the corner of the room, a faint ripple in the air. Another entry read, "It said I could leave, but only if someone else took my place." I slammed the journal shut, my heart racing. I turned to leave, but the cell door suddenly creaked and slammed shut behind me. "Hey!" I shouted, yanking at the door, but it wouldn't budge. The whispers turned into screams. They came from every direction, overlapping and echoing, and the walls began to shift. Faces pressed out of the concrete, their mouths open wide, their hollow eyes staring right at me. I backed into the corner, clutching the journal like it could protect me. My flashlight flickered and then it went out completely. In the pitch dark, I heard a voice, a deep, guttural voice, nothing like the whispers from before. "You found it," it said. "Now you understand." My hands trembled as I opened the journal again, flipping to the last page. There was only one sentence written there. "You're next, Michael." The walls seemed to close in, and I felt cold, bony hands grab at me, pulling me down. I screamed and fought, but it was like the room itself was alive, swallowing me whole. And then, nothing. The next thing I remember, it was morning, and I was sitting in the middle of the cell, still clutching the journal. The other guards found me and said they'd been looking for me all night. When I told them what happened, they laughed it off and said I must have fallen asleep or gotten lost. But I know the truth. Something is wrong with that cell. I quit the job the next day, but I haven't been able to sleep since. At night, I still hear it. The whispers. They're quieter now, but they're still calling my name. What would you have done if you heard your name from the dark? Let me know in the comments. Would you have stayed or would you have run? Story 2. The Forgotten Inmate. The strangest thing about the prison was the extra cell that wasn't on any blueprint. I was hired to help renovate Franklin State Penitentiary. My crew and I were assigned to the South Wing, a part of the prison that had been abandoned for decades. The place was falling apart with peeling paint, rusted bars, and an eerie silence that made it feel like time had stopped there. On my second day, while mapping out the section, I noticed something odd. At the end of one of the hallways was a cell that wasn't marked on the blueprints. It was tucked away, almost like someone didn't want it to be found. I decided to check it out. The door was rusted shut, but through the small window I could see scratches on the wall inside. I pulled out my flashlight and leaned closer. That's when I saw the words etched into the wall. "Don't wake him." It felt like the temperature dropped 10 degrees. I couldn't explain why, but I backed away quickly. Something about that cell didn't feel right. I radioed the foreman to let him know about the cell, but he shrugged it off. "If it's not on the plans, don't worry about it," he said. "Just seal it up." Easy enough, I thought. But the cell was about to make sure I couldn't ignore it. The first strange thing was the missing tools. Every day, something would go missing. Hammers, wrenches, even a whole tool belt once. At first, I blamed the guys on my crew, thinking someone was being careless. But then the noises started. At night, when the wing was supposed to be empty, I'd hear tapping, like someone knocking on the walls or pipes. I tried to convince myself it was just the building settling, but the tapping started to sound like footsteps. One afternoon, I was working near the unmarked cell when I felt it, like someone was standing behind me, watching. The hair on the back of my neck stood up. I spun around, but no one was there. That's when I saw him. A man in an old prison uniform was standing at the end of the hallway. He didn't move, didn't say a word, just stared at me with sunken eyes and a face that looked wrong, like he hadn't seen sunlight in decades. I froze, my heart racing. Then, in the blink of an eye, he was gone. I told my crew about it, but they laughed. "This place is just messing with your head," one of them said. Maybe they were right, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was seriously wrong with that cell. The next day, I walked past it again and stopped cold. The door, rusted shut just the day before, was now wide open. I didn't want to go inside, but my curiosity got the better of me. The cell was small and damp, with scratches covering every inch of the walls. Some were just marks, but others were words. He waits. Don't let him out. It wasn't my fault. In the corner of the cell was a pile of old, tattered rags. They looked like they hadn't been touched in years, but they gave off the feeling that someone had been lying there. That was it for me. I wasn't sticking around to see what else the cell had to offer. I told my foreman I wasn't feeling well and left early. But that night, I couldn't sleep. I kept seeing the man in the prison uniform, his hollow eyes staring at me. The next morning, I went back to the prison to finish the job. The faster we got it done, the faster I could leave that place for good. But as soon as I stepped into the South Wing, I knew something was off. tools we'd left neatly organized were now scattered across the floor like someone had thrown them. And then I heard it. The footsteps. They were slow, deliberate, and coming straight toward me. I grabbed my flashlight and turned, shining it down the hall. That's when I saw him again, the man in the uniform. He was walking toward me, his face blank and cold, like he wasn't entirely human. I panicked and ran. I didn't care about the tools, the job, or anything else. I just needed to get out. When I reached the exit, I made the mistake of looking back. He was right there. But instead of coming after me, he stopped and turned toward the unmarked cell. The door slammed shut, the sound echoing through the hall, then everything went silent. I left the prison that day and never went back. I don't know who or what was in that cell, but I know it wasn't anything natural. Who do you think was in that cell? Would you have gone in? Let me know in the comments if you think you'd survive meeting the forgotten inmate. Story 3, The Warden's Shadow. Every night, the lights in the warden's office flickered at exactly 3:13 a.m., even though the power was off. I read about Franklin State Penitentiary's dark history while researching for a story. One name stood out in every account: Warden Harris. He was infamous for his cruelty. People said he didn't just punish prisoners, he tortured them. The mystery surrounding his death was even darker. Some said he was killed during a prison riot. Others claimed he disappeared or took his own life. No one knew for sure, and that only made me more determined to uncover the truth. So, one cold night, I snuck into the prison to investigate. Getting in wasn't hard. The place had been abandoned for years, and part of the fence was already torn down. Once inside, I headed straight for the warden's office. The room still had an air of authority, even in its ruined state. Old portraits of previous wardens lined the walls, but Harris's was missing. The only sign of him was a dusty nameplate still sitting on the desk. I started going through what was left behind. Most of it was just old records, but then I found a folder labeled Incident 1956. It was like striking gold until I read it. The folder described a riot that broke out in the South Wing. The official report mentioned injuries and deaths, but was vague on the details. Then I came across witness accounts. Inmates talked about hearing screams that didn't sound human and claimed Warden Harris had been dragging a body into a hidden room beneath his office. I glanced around the room and noticed something odd behind the desk, faint drag marks on the floor leading to a loose floorboard. My heart pounded as I pried it open and found a staircase leading down. Everything in me told me not to go, but curiosity got the better of me. I switched on my flashlight and descended into the darkness. At the bottom, I found a hidden chamber. It was small and filled with shelves holding strange items, rusted shackles, old prison uniforms, and personal belongings like photos and letters. They all looked like they'd been taken from inmates. But the thing that stood out most was the chair. It was in the middle of the room, old and cracked, with heavy straps on the arms and legs. It felt wrong, like it was holding on to something sinister. I raised my camera to take a picture, but before I could, the temperature dropped, and my breath came out in white puffs. My flashlight flickered. Then I heard footsteps. They were slow and deliberate, coming from the stairs I'd just come down. My blood ran cold. A deep voice whispered, "You shouldn't have come here." I turned to run, but when I looked toward the stairs, I froze. Standing there was a tall figure in a dark uniform. His face wasn't visible. It was just a shadow, like the light refused to touch him. I backed away, my heart racing, and tripped over the chair. My camera hit the ground with a thud. When I looked up, the figure was gone. I grabbed my camera and bolted up the stairs, desperate to get out of that place. When I reached the office, the lights were flickering again, even though there was no power in the building. I glanced at my watch. It was 3:13 a.m. The hallway back to the exit felt longer than I remembered, and every step echoed unnaturally. I was almost there when I saw him again. The shadow of Warden Harris stood at the end of the corridor, completely still. I turned and ran down a different hallway, but somehow every path led back to him. I stopped, out of breath and shaking. "What do you want?" I yelled. The lights flickered, and when the hallway went dark, I felt him right in front of me. His voice was a low growl. "They're all still here, and now so are you." The last thing I remember was the flash of my camera going off. Then everything went black. When I woke up, I was outside the prison. I don't know how I got there, but the folder was still in my hand. My camera was gone, and so was my courage. I've tried telling people what happened, but no one believes me. They say it's just a ghost story. Maybe it is, but I know one thing for sure. Warden Harris is still in that prison, and he's not alone. If you were in my shoes, would you have stayed to investigate? Let me know in the comments if you think you'd survive the warden's shadow. Story 4. The escape that never was. We thought we could outsmart the prison, but it outsmarted us. The rumors started with the usual prison gossip. There was a tunnel underneath Franklin State Penitentiary that led to the outside. Most people laughed it off, but my cellmate Jack swore it was real. "Billy from D Block said his brother worked construction here years ago," Jax whispered one night. "He said they sealed it off, but the tunnel's still there." I didn't want to get my hopes up, but I couldn't stop thinking about it. For me, Jax, Deshawn, and Miguel, escape was the only chance we had. So, we made a plan. Over the next few weeks, we collected anything that could help us dig. Spoons, makeshift chisels, anything we could get our hands on. Miguel even bribed a night guard to look the other way. Jax claimed he'd seen an old map of the prison and knew exactly where to go. When the night finally came, we were ready. We snuck into the basement through a maintenance hatch. The air down there was damp and musty, and the only sound was the drip of water somewhere in the distance. "This is it," Jax said, pointing to a patch of bricks on the far wall. They looked newer than the rest. We worked quickly, chipping away the mortar in silence. When the first brick came loose, I swear I felt a gust of cold air, like the wall was breathing. Behind the bricks was a tunnel, just like the rumor said. It was narrow and dark, the walls damp and crumbling. We climbed in, flashlights in hand, and started moving single file. Jax led the way with the map. At first, it seemed like everything was going according to plan, but as we moved deeper into the tunnel, things started to feel wrong. The air got heavier, and the walls felt like they were closing in. "Did you hear that?" Deshawn whispered from behind me. We stopped and listened. Footsteps, slow and deliberate, coming from behind us. "Just the pipes," Jax said quickly, but I could tell he didn't believe it. We kept moving, but the footsteps didn't stop. Then came the whispers. They were faint at first, just murmurs I couldn't make out, but as we kept going, they grew louder, overlapping like a crowd of voices. And then Miguel screamed. I spun around, but he was gone. His flashlight was on the ground, the beam pointed at nothing. "Miguel!" I called out, my voice shaky. There was no answer, just the whispers getting louder. "We need to keep moving," Jack said, grabbing my arm. "He probably went back. He'll be fine." But I knew Miguel wouldn't go back alone. We pressed on, sticking closer together now. The tunnel twisted and turned in ways that didn't match Jax's map. The whispers followed us, and the walls seemed to pulse, like they were alive. Then it happened again. One moment, Deshawn was right behind me, and the next, he was gone. His flashlight was lying on the ground, flickering. "Deshawn!" Jax yelled. A low, guttural laugh echoed through the tunnel. It didn't sound human. "Something's not right," I said, my voice trembling. "No kidding," Jax muttered, flipping through the map with shaking hands. "We're almost there. Just keep going." But the tunnel had other plans. The air was so thick now that every breath felt like a struggle. The whispers had turned into voices, angry and accusing. They called our names, telling us to stop, to turn back. And then Jax disappeared. 1 second, he was in front of me, and the next, he was gone. His map and flashlight were on the ground, but there was no sign of him. I was alone. The tunnel seemed to stretch endlessly in every direction. The walls felt like they were closing in, and the voices were deafening now. I don't remember much after that. I ran, or at least I think I did. The next thing I knew, I was back in my cell, lying on the cold concrete floor. Jax, Miguel, and Deshawn were gone. When I tried to tell the guards what happened, they just laughed. They said I'd never left my cell, but I know what I saw. The tunnel is real, and it doesn't let anyone escape. What would you have done? Would you have gone into the tunnel? Let me know in the comments if you think you'd make it out. Story 5. The Night of No Return. I was just a delivery driver, but the last run I ever made was to that cursed prison. It started with a call from my dispatcher. "We've got a last-minute order for Franklin State Penitentiary. They need supplies tonight." "Franklin?" I said. "That place has been shut down for years." "Look, it's the address on the order," he replied. "Just drop it off. You'll get a bonus for the late shift." The extra cash was tempting, so I agreed. But the whole drive there, I couldn't shake this uneasy feeling. When I arrived, the prison looked completely abandoned. The gates were wide open, and the main building stood in eerie silence. I parked my truck, grabbed the delivery cart, and headed inside. The air was stale and heavy, and the place smelled of mildew and rust. My footsteps echoed as I wheeled the cart through the dimly lit corridors. I called out, "Hello? Anyone here?" No answer. It didn't make sense. If they needed supplies so urgently, where was everyone? I left the cart in the hallway and decided to explore, hoping to find whoever placed the order. That's when I heard it. Footsteps. They were faint at first, coming from somewhere deeper in the prison. "Hello?" I called out again. "Delivery here." The footsteps stopped. I shone my flashlight down the corridor, but it was empty. Just shadows stretching across the walls. Then, from the corner of my eye, I saw movement, a figure at the far end of the hallway. "Hey, you there?" I called. The figure didn't respond. They were dragging something behind them, a large sack that scraped against the floor. I hesitated, but curiosity got the better of me, and I followed. The figure turned a corner, and when I got there, they were gone. All that was left was the sack, sitting in the middle of the hallway. I approached slowly, my heart racing. The sack looked old and dirty, tied shut with a frayed rope. Against my better judgment, I untied it. It was empty. Before I could process what was happening, I heard a loud slam behind me. I spun around to see the door at the end of the hallway had shut on its own. My flashlight flickered, and the temperature dropped so fast that I could see my breath. Something was wrong. I turned to leave, but when I got back outside, my truck was gone. Panic set in as I searched the lot, but there was no sign of it. I ran back into the prison, hoping to find a phone or someone who could help. But the moment I stepped inside, the doors slammed shut behind me. The slamming echoed through the corridors one after another, as if the prison was alive and sealing me in. Then the whispers started. At first they were faint, like the wind, but soon they grew louder. They weren't just whispers, they were voices, overlapping and calling my name. Then I saw them. Figures began to appear in the shadows. Pale faces with hollow eyes, wearing old prison uniforms. They moved slowly at first, but as I backed away, they started rushing toward me. I ran, turning corner after corner, trying to find a way out. But no matter which way I went, I ended up deeper in the prison. Finally, I stumbled into a cell block. The lights flickered wildly, and the cell doors began to rattle, slamming open and shut. I watched in horror as ghostly prisoners and guards emerged, reenacting scenes of violence and chaos. Guards beat prisoners, prisoners attacked each other, and blood spilled onto the floor, vanishing as quickly as it appeared. I tried to turn back, but the hallway behind me was gone. The cells stretched endlessly in every direction. Before I could react, cold hands shoved me into a cell and the door slammed shut behind me. I screamed, pounding on the bars, but no one came. The ghostly figures surrounded me, their mouths moving silently as they stared with empty eyes. Then everything went dark. When I woke up, I was still in the cell. The prison was silent, but I could feel it watching me. The walls seemed to breathe, and faint whispers echoed in the distance. I've been here ever since. I don't know how long it's been, but one thing is clear. No one escapes Franklin State Penitentiary. Do you think anyone could ever escape this prison? Share your thoughts below, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button for more chilling tales like this.